Okay, so welcome. So in this video, we're going to start talking about different, basically in a manner, we're going to talk about statistics and we're going to talk about measures of central tendency. Okay, so what does that mean? What does measures of central tendency mean? It means that, hey, we want to find the middle of the data set or some value that represents the middle or the center of a data set. Okay, so central tendency means that, hey, where does the balancing point or where's the middle of the data exist, or where is it located? Okay, and there's different ways of measuring the center or central tendency of a population or of a data set. Okay, and a lot of times if we want to know something about a population, 99% of the time we want to use a data set, we want to use statistics. Okay, so what does all that mean? Well, let's start with the basics. So data is just a collection of observations. Okay, so it's a set of observations. That's what we call data. Okay, so it's measured observations from a population. Okay, so these are, or we could say counted, measured let me write it a different way. Okay, so data, right? It's the facts or information from which conclusions may be drawn. Okay, so this is the big part of the decision-making process, right? So if we decide, what if we want to figure something out, right? Let's say we want to look at the data on gun control laws. So here's a great question, right? So this is one that comes up a lot, I guess. Do stricter gun control laws lead to or cause or less crime committed by guns, right? So that's a question, right, that could be answered, and we can answer that looking at the data, right? So we could look at data, right? So the data, the facts, information, and then what we can do is once we look at the data, then we can draw conclusions, say, okay, based on the data, does that support that conjecture, if you will, okay? Or doesn't it? Okay, so that's what data comes in. So we're going to collect data so that we can make conclusions, make decisions, and that's a big part of the decision-making process or critical thinking, right? So now, any kind of measurement that we get from the data is called a statistic, right? A statistic is a standardized measurement. Oops. Oops. So a statistic is a standardized, meaningful measure of a set of data that reveals a certain feature or characteristic of the data. So in other words, it's a numerical value, right? So again, it's a numerical value that describes a particular characteristic of the data. Okay? So, and here's the thing. Now, what we're going to talk about is descriptive statistics. And so this is what we call descriptive statistics because it describes a particular feature or particular characteristic of the data. Okay? One of those descriptive statistics that we're going to talk about is called the average. And the average is the approximate number that is the central value of the data set. Okay, so it's a measurement of central tendency. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is the average, or what we call the arithmetic mean, or the arithmetic average, or statistical mean. It all means the same thing. So we're going to call it the average or mean, right? Okay, and in statistics, we call it the mean. Okay, arithmetic mean is exactly what it is, but we call the mean, or what we know as the average, what we would colloquially call the average. Okay, so the mean of a data set is a number that represents the center of the data set. Okay, now how do we calculate that? Okay, how do we calculate that? Well, the calculation for the average or the mean is just like we did in grade school. You take all the values in the data set, right? And you add them up and then divide by the total number of values that you have in your data set. So it's going to be, this is the formula. So again, this symbol here is sigma, it's capital sigma, which means it's a summation symbol. So this means the sum of all x. What does x represent? X represents the value of each data point in your data set. So if you have data, we call it x data, which means if you have a list of 10 values, each value is an x variable, or an x value. So we want to sum up all of those values in your data set, and then we're going to divide by n, which is the sample size, or the number of observations you have. So again, this is the definition of the mean, or the average. You take all the values in your set, you add them up and divide by the total number of observations in your data set. And that's your average, okay? And that's how we're going to calculate the mean. And we use the value for the mean in statistics, we use x bar. So again, we denote the mean of a data set as x bar. N represents the sample size, right? X bar represents the mean. Sigma, capital sigma here, represents summation, so we're summing up what? All the values of x in the data set. Okay? And so that's the formula for the mean. And we'll go through the steps in the next video. Have a great day.